um, ultimate solution to that. Not only was it a great market, Coca-Cola were there. You hear about the drink Fanta Orange. Well, that was first invented in Nazi Germany because they couldn't get the ingredients for Coca-Cola. So you had Coca-Cola there. You had, of course, Ford was there helping Ferdinand Porsche, invent the Volkswagen. Help Hitler invent the Volkswagen, the people's car, just as Henry Ford had the Model T. You had DuPont. You had many war profiteer corporations that actually prevail to this day and profit from the U.S., Israeli, and British wars. The global war on terror. Ironically, you have many of these war profiteer corporations that kind of profited from both sides of the war. That want war, right? These corporations they make money. Corporations need growth. Well, how do you have growth? You sell more products, and how do you if you're producing bombs, you need consumers of bombs, right? And then who consumes bombs? Well, militaries that are going to use them. If they didn't use their bombs, they wouldn't need to buy any more bombs, right? And then they wouldn't have any growth in their corporation, and it wouldn't be a good investment for the parasites who've invested in that. And so this is the irony of corporations, right? They always need to grow. And so in this instance, you had corporations looking across the water and saying, well, there's a system that's proving to sort of work to some extent that doesn't do what we do and would actually encourage the people who we employ to seize what we perceive to be ours, or at least to change the system of organized and legalized theft which we profit from. And we have this guy, Adolf Hitler, and his friend Mussolini offering a wonderful alternative. Let me think. Maybe we'll go over there and lend him a hand and support him and invest in the Hitlerian defense of capitalism, the Hitlerian military-industrial complex. And that's exactly what they did. And so from progressivism, the potential for social democracy, you had the SDP in Germany, of course. So the shift from progressivism to fascism. And you, of course, had many industrialists in the United States of America who were vehemently fascist. Why? Because they didn't want to support social democracy as personified to some extent in the New Deal. And you had it. Most of the elite in Britain were exactly the same. Professor Hall emphasizes how Churchill was a defector from his class, wanting war against Nazi Germany, mainly due to his sort of messianic jingoism and, imperialist mentality that he sort of wanted Britain to still rule the world, rule the waves instead of, like they do today, wave the rules. But nonetheless, that's exactly what happened, and Professor Hall documents that in no uncertain terms. I've sort of highlighted some interesting quotes, which I'm just going to try to give you some kind of idea of what sort of themes you can expect if you have the privilege of reading this book. And so so Professor Hall also, of course, goes into the other current that was part of the fascist ideology, and that was, of course, eugenics or pseudoscience or racial theories or social Darwinism. Call it what you will. This idea that there was some kind of that the world could be categorized by races, and that there was some kind of agenda where the white race, which we know, of course, is mythology, doesn't exist. It's a fabrication, it's a social construct. But that this idea of white people had to basically assert themselves and maintain their hegemony and maintain their purity, right? And so that was a prominent theme of fascism. And of course, many industrialists, due to the legacy of the US in the US, were white. And many of the proletariat were black, and so you can imagine these guys, not realizing, well, maybe a lot of these black working class people are impoverished because of a certain institution called slavery. Like, hello, but nevertheless, so you had people like Henry Ford who were, rampant fascists, rampant racists, disseminating anti-Semitic propaganda, viewing Slavs and Jewish people and black people as inferior. And of course, they would be the prime candidates for the kind of servants of the white race, the kind of people you'd enslave and you'd exploit and you'd basically thieve the labor or the fruits of their labor. The people from whom you'd appropriate the wealth they create. And so Professor Hall goes into the eugenics movement and gives a historical analysis of that phenomenon. and he of course emphasizes the truism that, of course, the eugenics movement had wide support, throughout the world, in the United States for sure, Britain, Canada, other countries. And so this the Germans didn't just kind of invent eugenics. They applied the eugenics theories in practice in a most disastrous way, as we all know. But I'm just seeing a quote on page 232 of the book. Professor Hall writes, as Hitler's first deputy Rudolf Hess observed, National Socialism is nothing but applied biology. And so there we go. And so Hall draws upon this text. I mean, he's obviously draws upon many texts, but this book, which is particularly interesting, War Against the Weak, by Edwin Black. Edwin Black's parents were in the Nazi Holocaust. They survived the Nazi Holocaust. He's got a very interesting story if you read his book, the transfer agreement, about how some Zionists collaborated with the Nazis, and how his father met his mother when she was buried in the ground in some pit in Poland, I believe. It's an interesting story. So he's obviously got a vested interest in trying to find out, well, who in his country, the United States, was complicit with the Nazis, and he's written many books which Professor Hall draws upon and which Professor Hall contributes to this debate, adds to the debate and compounds it in a very important way. So this idea that you actually had people in the United States who identified with people in the Nazi state. Not everyone agreed with the Rooseveltian version of capitalism, where you kind of, well, they're all workers, white, black, social democracy, let them trade unionize, let's help them to better themselves. No, like some people agreed with the Hitlerian model of capitalism, which was basically that white is right, white people should be privileged, should enslave certain groups of society, should have the plum jobs and so on. And it was basically a social Darwinist mindset. So there's one section which I highlighted, which is of particular interest. This is where Professor Hall encapsulates a lot of the things I've been discussing, such as the eugenics and the Nazis' defense of capitalism, which was embraced by certain members of the US elite. And so Hall writes, once Hitler and his deputies assumed near omnipotent authority over the machinery of the German state in the mid-1930s, the reintroduction of slavery would become an important means of integrating the Nazi defense of capitalism with the regime's racist preoccupations. As the military-industrial complex of the Hitlerian Germany gathered momentum in its bid for global dominance, a host of Nazi decrees began the process of making slaves of many millions of Jews, Slavs, and Gypsies, and others. It is estimated that the Nazi regime enslaved between 8 million and 12 million individuals. So you can imagine, when you hear about, oh, well, Hitler built roads. Well, surely the best way to recover your economy and to outcompete your competitor nation states would be to enslave vast swathes of Western and Eastern Europe. 8 to 12 million unpaid, exploited workers. That's one sure way to rectify your economy in a very misanthropic way. But so Hall carries on. The corporate exploiters of Hitlerian slavery included Volkswagen, Ford, Werk, Siemens, and Daimler-Benz. The most notorious exploiter of slave labor was the consortium of chemical enterprises known as IG Farben. This amalgam of interrelated businesses has been described as the corporate headquarters of the industrial force behind Hitler's Third Reich. IG Auschwitz, so Auschwitz, but it's got IG prior to it, right? So it's a kind of branded institution, was prominent among IG Farben's many commercial enterprises in the military-industrial complex. It briefly dominated Europe during the apogee of Hitler's career. Auschwitz got its name from the German-style pronunciation of Oswiecim. The small Polish town of Oswiecim was strategically located in a region rich with oil, coal mines, railway links, and ample resources of fresh water.